Welcome back to the Smugsy Show, where Minifan intellectuals come together. We have a great show lined up today for you, and pleased to be spending the corona apocalypse with all of you. But first, I wanted to share with you a survival tip if you are sheltering in place and find yourself without an olive or a twist. What I do is I just turn to my ficus plant. I find a leaf that's, nice and shiny. It's kind of small, and you just get rid of that one. You just poke it, you just plop it right in, and it gives it a nice freshness. It's like kind of a pucker sour, which is a new thing. So you certainly don't want to give the ficus leaves to your dog, because the ficus plant kills dogs, and it's highly toxic to children. They get an allergic reaction. But if you don't have a dog and you don't have kids, this is a great idea to get through this crisis. I'm also pleased to report that the Smugsy Show is in compliance with the Trump administration's #1 policy on preventing the spread of the coronavirus. As many of you know, because you listen to the so-called news, you're really not supposed to be in crowds of more than 10 people. And it's exciting for me that the Smugsy Show is really the only show that can guarantee at no time will there be more than 10 people watching the show with you at the same time. So you can feel just safe here. And the Smugsy Show is it is social distancing. Is another way of thinking about it. It's just a positive way of thinking about things in this obviously very dark time. We're once again, running a generator to produce this show for you, but it's worth it. This show, the Smugsy Show, is for people who like the Kirk Minihane Show, but they don't want to be in a cult. And so the number of Minifan intellectuals obviously is small. I mean, if you think about it, there's a small quantity. That's like the mathematical term. That's how we say it in mathematics, small quantity. But that doesn't mean the Minifan intellectual group is weak. If you think, for instance, about the 1%, the 1% in society, social, economic, like measuring social, economic disparity, that sort of thing, income inequality, that kind of thing. Well, the 1%, the club that, rules from Davos in their private jets and their golf courses. This week, the stock market lost $3.6 trillion in value, okay, over the course of a week, $3.6 trillion. And that only represented 10%. So if you just, if you do the math, if the 1% lost 10%, and that was 360 trillion, then you can imagine what's left in the 90% for the 1%. So I'm just saying, do you think that they're going to run out of toilet paper? I don't think so. So this week, the Kirk Minihane Show returned. The S&P suffered its biggest loss since the 2008 financial crisis. But just think about that for a minute. In the 2008 financial crisis, who came out ahead afterwards? It was the 1%. So the Minifan intellectuals are kind of like the 1%. We take 10% of the Kirk Minihane Show that's smart, and we leave the rest for kind of like the nut jobs, the crazy, stupid stuff. We leave that for the misfits and the nutters, with their infected tattoos and pimples and facial hair. Those people, they're lovely, really great people. They're great Minifans. They make up the Minifan universe, really. I'm just saying that the Minifan intellectuals might be small in number, but that doesn't mean we're not important. So we are, you and me, here on the Smugsy Show, we're like the 1%. And it's obvious from seeing the show this week that, we'll see if we're going to watch the show and we're going to analyze it using our minds, using reason, okay, and logic, and we're going to make predictions about whether or not the Kirk Minihane Show can survive this thing, the corona apocalypse. Did Kirk Minihane come back strong this week? Absolutely, he did. His voice was confident. He didn't cry. That was nice. This thing, though, about missing Dee Dee and then the talking like a baby with the Dale Bear, that was a little disturbing, but we've seen worse. And we've kind of been down that road before. I think, there's no real surprise there, right? That's kind of the secret sauce of the show. It's like just a little bit of crazy, just kind of the conflict in the story, or what we would call the dramatic tension. It's the same conflict that we see over and over. I mean, the search for an enemy, right? It's the search for an enemy for the Minifans and the Mincels to fight, and for Kirk to have lead the fight. And then there's the management of the infighting and the packs and the social hierarchy. We certainly know from this week's show where the Mini-ladies and Mini-girls stand, all three of them. Kirk said, quote, "Women Minifans are crazy." And then he cast some serious shade on that Laura Lynn, who I imagine she might be just a little disgusted right now with how things are going down. If I was her, I would be. I know that. Kirk also said Blind Mike's groupie doesn't have a compelling personality, and which I think raises a very good question, a very, very good question, an important question. Who has a compelling personality on the show? I mean, sure, there's DEC. He looks like the Unabomber. Is that compelling? I don't know. What do you think? What's obvious is that the fans are dropping like flies. And what, obviously in Dee Dee, speaking of disgusting, let's just talk for a second about the new proposed programming, Men at 10. This is this thing when Mincels and Minifans are all going to kind of jerk off in sync as kind of a team building exercise. I'm just not sure that right now is the time for that kind of thing. If you think, do we want an enemy or a quarantine? It's a question. It's not my question. I'm just an observer, I'm not into a cult. I'm not all tied up in it. I just think it's interesting to watch, kind of like we said last week about the alpha males. So obviously public enemy number one is the coronavirus, right? Coronavirus, which, by the way, the scientists say that coronavirus is exactly how it sounds when a poisonous snake injects venom into your skin. When it punctures your skin and injects the venom, it sounds just like that, coronavirus. So there it is, this big poisonous snake in the Kirk Minihane studio this week when Kirk comes back. And what do they decide to do? They design a program that's focused on the public release of bodily fluids. I don't know. It's that kind of edginess that really, makes the wackos go crazy. But is it a plan for the future survival of the show? I don't know. Look what happened to Tom Brady. We'll see. Time will tell. If I were advising Kirk as an expert, as a business expert, I would suggest that they do for the Kirk Minihane Show what Louis Vuitton is doing for coronavirus. You probably don't follow the markets like I do, or as closely as I do, and you probably don't know about the French company that owns the brand of Louis Vuitton and Tiffany and Moet Chandon. It's a company called LVMH, or LVMH, as the French like to say. So this company is stopping production of its perfume and cosmetics in Paris to produce 12 tons of hand sanitizer for public hospitals. I mean, think about that. 12 tons, that's over 25,000 pounds of hand sanitizer that this company is going to make. It's going to probably smell fabulous. Now, why can't the Kirk Minihane Show do something like that instead of the Men at 10? I mean, that's just a question I throw out there for the show and for other people, for other intellectuals to kind of bat around. I mean, brainwash. Yeah, brainwash and hand wash. Just wash. Maybe instead of Men at 10, there could be like Men at Work Fighting Corona. Something like that. It would be a little bit boring, but it might extend the Miniverse just a little bit more broadly. It might bring in a broader audience. But Big Steve, he's in charge, and I thought it was admirable the way he kind of took advantage of Kirk, who was a little bit weak. I mean, Kirk came back with a strong appearance, but you could tell he was still a little bit wounded. And I thought Steve really pounced and kind of did the rope-a-dope with the right wing, like partisan claptrap. He just kind of blah, 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 all these, political talking points that I think goes right into the Minifans and the Mincels who aren't intellectuals. I think that information it's meant to go right in subconsciously and kind of just sit on the other stuff. So when these people, if ever they have to interact in the world or say something about society, they just blah, 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 whatever Steve said, they just repeat. So, I mean, that's really brilliant, I think, and something, it's just something, an observation, a scientific observation. But here on the Smugsy Show, there's no brainwashing. Okay, there's no cults. So just the other big takeaway for me, and this is, I think, an interesting question, is when is the show going to see the opportunity in Kirk formally evaluating all these other shows by all these dipshits who are trying to, kiss his ass all the time, oh, look at me over here, look at me over here. Now, some people say that that's what I'm doing, but that's not what I'm doing. That's not what I'm doing at all. That's not what this show is about. But for those other shows that depend so much on Kirk's, approval, I mean, what would they do to get, a rating system in place? And then there could be competitions and I don't know, there could be some betting. I mean, a Kirk, it'd be like Rotten Tomatoes, but maybe little symbols of some kind. That, I don't know. When are they going to just start getting creative, Start getting creative. Some people like those parody songs, but the Minifan intellectuals, that is kind of romper room. So we would prefer, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for all of us, but since this is my show and it's the Smugsy Show and it's a show for Minifan intellectuals, I would like to put out there that if there was never another parody song, that would be just fine. I mean, or another show about someone else's mental illness, that would be okay. It's not that we don't like them, it's just that, well, what else was something smart about the show? Well, I liked the quote from Steve when he said, this really struck me as profound. He said, and I quote, "Wuhan bat flu is going to run through Barstool like a fucking freight train." Close quote. That's something to think about. And I guess that's it for today. I mean, we'll see what happens. As probably many of you know, Kirk said his temperature was 98.6 in the show this week. And recent studies say that actually the baseline for most people is closer to 98.2. So technically, Kirk has a fever. So it's just, wow, so much is going on. Happy to sort it all out with you here on the Smugsy Show. And until next time, I'm going to say see you later.